It's time for some 2S LIPO testing. Recently, I received this 6100 mAh Gens Ace Redline 130C LIPO, and I wanted to see how it performed against my most powerful battery historically, which is this Liperior 2S 50C 5000 milliamp hour. I've done a bunch of testing. I'm gonna compile it all into this video. We're gonna look at top speed in my Traxxas Bandit. We're gonna look at runtime in the Armor Big Rock out in this field to see how long it runs with the different batteries. We're gonna measure voltage sag. We're gonna measure top speed in the grass. We're gonna go ahead and look at internal resistance in these batteries. We're gonna measure the battery's weight. We're gonna look at the capacity and the spread of the capacity, different voltages, all kinds of different parameters to see how these different batteries perform. So again, I have this Gens Ace battery. Big thank you to Gens Ace. I have this Liperior battery. Big thank you to Liperior as well. This one here I got from Ovonic about a year ago, so thank you to Ovonic for sending this battery out, even though its performance stinks. I have this Anwanfi battery that I purchased about 2 years ago. This is the worst battery I ever owned. The thing crapped out, it puffed up, terrible performance, no customer service. I could never get anyone from Anwanfi to write back to me. They may well have gone out of business. I couldn't find this battery for sale anymore, but yeah, this thing is trash. And then I'm also gonna run this 8-year-old Turnigy Nanotech battery. This little shorty battery has been excellent. It was the first LIPO I ever purchased. It's rated at 65C, and this thing performs nearly as well as it did the day I purchased it, which is really impressive. So we'll run all 5 of these batteries and we'll see which ones come out on top. Stay tuned. So now I'm gonna do the high load grass test. What I'm gonna do is put each LIPO in this truck and we're gonna time how long it runs up and down this large grass field. The resistance of the grass will create a high load, and we'll put these batteries under a stress test and we'll see how far the voltage sags using this voltmeter. Also, I have a GPS on the truck so we can see what the maximum speed is for each of these batteries. And from that, between the run times, the top speed, and the voltage sag, we can make a really solid determination on which ones perform the best. All right, let's go ahead and get this truck out here and see what happens. First up is the Gens Ace Redline 130C 6100 mAh LIPO. The GPS is zeroed and is registering. And I have my trusty stopwatch, and I'm gonna go ahead and start it now. All right, that's 8 minutes. That's an incredibly long run time on thick grass like this. Still going. All right, there we go. At we'll call it 8:13, it hit the low voltage shutoff. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset the ESC one time, just to make sure it wasn't a thermal condition or anything. And we'll see how much longer it goes. Now the high performance LIPOs like this one typically will only go for a couple of seconds. This thing will be drained as far down as it can go. Now the maximum speed on grass was 25.9 miles an hour. Let me go ahead and reset this ESC. And again, I only expect it to go a few more seconds. No, it's not gonna go at all, it's done. Now I'm gonna go ahead and check the voltage of the battery. The lower the voltage, the less voltage sag there is. A poor performing battery will sag several tenths of a volt per cell during this test and will have a much higher end voltage. But a high performance battery like this, I bet it's down around 3.4 volts per cell. Hopefully not much lower than that. We'll see. Oh, dandelion. All right, one cell dipped pretty low. The other's at 3.3. Looks like about 3.2 and 3.3. That's the problem with high performance batteries, is they really will run down low. So when they're dead, they are really dead. But a lower performance battery will leave a lot on the table because the voltage will sag a lot and hit the low voltage shutoff, despite it in reality having a much higher voltage once it recovers. I'll demonstrate this next. I'll run the Ovonic 4600 50C LiPo next, and I bet it runs half, maybe a third the time this battery just did. Next up is the Ovonic 4600 Shorty 50C LiPo. This battery has disappointed from day one. It's always underperformed, and even hesitant to run it in the truck, honestly, because it's not going to do well and it's going to just crap out really quickly. But let's see how long it goes. The GPS is reset and reading. And I'll go ahead and start the stopwatch now. All right, there we go. We'll call that at about 3:45. Now I'm gonna go ahead and reset the ESC, and this one may well run another 15 or 20 seconds longer because it will have experienced more voltage sag. Now its top speed was only 23.5 miles an hour, so quite a bit slower than the Gen's Ace, which isn't shocking, but it wasn't putting out nearly as much power for the duration of its run either, because it was running so much slower. I forget what side the switch is on here. All right, so I reset the ESC, and we'll go ahead and time it starting at 35 after, 4:35. All right, there we go. It went for about another 50 seconds, which is longer than any battery has tested. Once they hit the low voltage shutoff, they usually only go, I think the most I've seen is about 30 seconds. So that just goes to show you how bad the voltage sag was. And whatever the voltage is reading now, it would have been significantly higher before I just did that extra nearly minute of runtime. So let's see how low the voltage is. All right, there we go. So we're down to 3.58, and I think it's 3.59. A little hard to see. So significantly higher than the Gen's Ace, and that's because this battery was experiencing a lot more voltage sag, and it got down to around 3.4 volts per cell or 3.3 volts per cell. Wherever that low voltage shutoff is, and cut off prematurely. I ran for another minute, and still was down at 3.6 volts per cell. And what that does is it does not allow you to access a lot of the capacity in the battery, because these poor performance batteries, and you'll see this later when I show you the spreadsheet, they have most of their capacity down below 3.7 volts per cell, and it probably shut off initially around 3.7 volts per cell. So maybe 2/3 or so of that capacity is below 3.7 volts per cell and not accessible. So there you go. That's why the run times are so much shorter for batteries with poor voltage sag when you run them in a high demand RC device. Next up is my Turnigy Nanotech 4200 milliamp hour battery. It's rated at 65C. This battery is about 8 years old, yet it runs nearly as good as the day I purchased it. So we're gonna go ahead and see what this can do. I have little doubt it's gonna do better than that Ovonic. Go ahead and clear this GPS. Okay, I have the GPS cleared out, and it's reading. And I have no doubt this battery is gonna run longer than that Ovonic did. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Now. All right, there we go. That was at about 5:29. 25.4 miles an hour. So about 2 miles an hour faster than the Ovonic. And not too far off from the Gens Ace. But I don't think this battery is gonna run nearly a minute like the Ovonic did, because it's probably a lot closer to the low voltage shutoff this truck's set for. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start it now. Yeah, so we got like, what, 3 or 4 seconds. That was it. And it's done. So the voltage sag in this one is not nearly as bad as the Ovonic. Let's see how low it got. There we go. This one's nice and evenly balanced, about 3.3 volts per cell is what's left in it. And despite it being 8 years old and having a lower rated capacity, it ran significantly longer than the Ovonic. And that's again because the Ovonic has significant voltage sag. It's not to say that the Ovonic doesn't have its claimed capacity. The Ovonic actually holds more capacity than this Turnigy. The problem is it's not accessible because the voltage sag is so bad. It's down at a voltage where it can't run. The voltage dips down, it hits the low voltage shutoff, and it can't perform. So that's why low performance batteries are no good for high amp, high load situations, be it speed runs or running a heavy truck through grass or anything like that. They could be okay in a crawler or maybe an older brush vehicle that doesn't demand a whole lot of amps, but that's about it. Now the final battery I'm going to run today is my Liperior 5050C LIPO. This thing has been running neck and neck with the Gens Ace battery in speed runs. They're basically equal. However, it does hold less capacity, so it probably won't run quite as long, but I think it's going to be solidly in second place. Let's go ahead and see how it performs. Go ahead and I'll clear out the GPS. GPS is registering. Cleared out the stopwatch, and we'll go ahead and start now. All right, there we go. And we're gonna have to take about 30 seconds off of that because I had an issue. I don't know if the transmitter is running low on battery or what, but that was a little under 7 minutes. I'll go back and look at the video and see exactly how much time I need to take off. But a little under 7 minutes. It doesn't have to be exact. It's just trying to get a ballpark number for the runtime. Clearly it was longer than the Turnigy, and clearly it was shorter than the Gens Ace. We did reach the fastest speed yet though. Again, this isn't exactly scientific, so there's different patches of grass that are taller or shorter, which could have some effect on this, but this is the fastest speed so far. Let's see what the voltage looks like. Okay, so we're looking at 3.35, 3.38, so in line with the better performing batteries. Lower voltage is a good thing. The battery's warm, but not as hot as the Turnigy got. All right, next up will be the Turnigy. Now this Turnigy battery just went 5 or 6 passes and did not hit the low voltage shutoff. 62 miles an hour. Now I'm going to go ahead and go through the spreadsheet with all the information I compiled from my testing. As you can see, the 5 different 2S batteries that were tested are listed, as are their manufacturer specifications for capacity and C rating. As I mentioned earlier, C ratings are made up by the manufacturers and take them with a grain of salt. I've tested batteries with a 35 C rating that blow away batteries with a 100 C rating. So again, take them with a grain of salt. Now I did include the Anwanfi battery. The test date I have for that, it's about a year old, but I had enough of it. I thought it was worth still throwing in here. Again though, I cannot recommend this battery. I may have just received the bad one, but it never performed well. It quickly failed, it puffed up, and there was no customer service, even when I knew they were in business. Now, the Ovonic, it held nearly as much as its claimed capacity. And what I'll say is I only measured the capacity from 3.4 volts to 4.2 volts per cell. And this Ovonic battery has most of its capacity in the lower voltage range. So had I gone down to say 3.2 or 3.3 volts per cell and started measuring there, it probably would have been right around 4,600 or maybe even higher. All the Ovonic batteries I've ever tested have exceeded their manufacturer's claim for capacity. And this one, I just started a little higher than I've done in previous tests. Normally I go down to 3.3 volts per cell, but I'd done 3.4 for 2S testing in the past, so I just stuck with that. The Turnigy was a little below its claimed capacity. Part of that may be the fact for testing it was between 7 and 8 years old, so I'm not going to hold that against it. The Liperior and Gens Ace, they both exceeded their manufacturer claim capacity, even when only measuring it from 3.4 to 4.2 volts per cell. But any of these bottom 3 really weren't going to gain much in the way of capacity had I started them at 3.2 or 3.3 volts per cell, because most of their capacity is up in the higher end of the voltage range. Now, one other thing to note is the Turnigy Nanotech. These numbers may be slightly inflated. I ran into an issue when I was charging it that one of the cells were not balancing, so I had to throw it on a different charger that does a better job of balancing, and I added the 2 totals up. So it may be a little below the 3505 listed there, but it's in the ballpark. Now, the next column here lists the approximate runtime. And as you can see, the Ovonic only made it 3 minutes 47 seconds before hitting the low voltage cutoff, which is quite a bit shorter than even the battery that's rated with less capacity, the Turnigy Nanotech, which ran over 1.5 minutes longer. Now, when reset, the Ovonic went nearly a whole nother minute, and that's because the voltage sag was so bad when I was running it that it shut off prematurely, and once it was reset and it recovered for a little while, it was able to go quite a bit longer until the voltage sagged enough to hit the low voltage shutoff again. The other 3 batteries, once they hit the low voltage shutoff, they're pretty much done, and that's because there's very little voltage sag. So let's just say the voltage cutoff was at 3.3 volts per cell. Maybe they're at 3.4 volts per cell. And when they're done, they're done. They have nothing really left to offer. They've discharged everything they're able to discharge. This next column I put together just to demonstrate how a battery like this Ovonic, you're not able to reach all of its capacity. It has quite a bit of capacity, but it's down in the voltage range where it's not usable in an RC car that's going to demand a lot of current. Now in a crawler or maybe an older brushed car that's not geared very aggressively, this battery may perform satisfactorily and there wouldn't be nearly as much of a difference. But I'm interested in performance, and the Ovonic is not a performance battery. None of the Ovonic batteries I've tested have been strong performers. So as you can see, per 1000 milliamp hours of measured capacity, the Ovonic only ran about 0.8 of a minute per 1000 milliamp hours, whereas the other three were all very similar and they ran quite a bit longer. Again, that's because their voltage sag was less and their capacity was accessible. Only about 50% of the Ovonic's capacity was available during tested before the first shutoff, maybe a little more than 50%, but in that ballpark, whereas these others were closer to 90% and they ran deeper. As you can see here, the voltage of the Ovonic was around 3.6 volts per cell, where these others were around 3.3 volts per cell, which again allows these batteries to access much more of their total capacity. Capacity of Ovonic down at say 3.3 or 3.4 volts per cell does no good because the truck's going to shut off before you can get down there and access it. Now the next column here indicates if the voltage was even amongst the two different cells during testing. And all of them were pretty even, except I'm not sure what happened with the Gens Ace here. This one cell didn't appear to be very happy. I'm not sure if I reran the test if things would have been different. When I threw it on the bounce charger, it equalized very quickly and there was no issue, so I don't think there's a problem, but it was worth mentioning. Now, in general, a battery with lower internal resistance is going to perform better than a battery with higher internal resistance. As you can see here, the batteries that performed worse had higher internal resistance. This column just shows the approximate number of times I've charged these various batteries. None of them have a whole lot of use, and the age is more of a factor. Although again, this Ovonic, it seems to perform basically as good as it did when it was new. Now the measured weight, in general, everything else being equal, a heavier LiPo is going to perform better than a lighter one. Now this one, again, I may have just had a bad battery, and this one may have performed better than the Ovonic had it not had an issue, but I'll never know. This next column shows the top speed. Now the first set of numbers is in the Arma Big Rock. Again, you can see the Ovonic underperformed versus the other three batteries. And at 2S, there's not nearly as much load as when I run this test as there is at 3S. I'll run the 3S test shortly, and I have about 12, maybe even 13 different LiPos I can use for that test. So the drawdown here doesn't show as big of a difference between the Ovonic and the other three as it would have if I was drawing more amps, but you can still see it here. Now the Liperior did beat the others by a considerable amount, and I don't know if, maybe I just hit an area of the field with shorter grass or something like that. But in general, these were all within a mile an hour or so of each other, and they outperformed the Ovonic, which was expected. Now, the next set of numbers here is when I tested these batteries in my Kyosho Raiders, a vintage car with a brushless setup in it. And at 2S, the Anwanfi, back when it was working properly, and the Ovonic were very similar. They ran a little less than 40 miles an hour, whereas the Turnigy was about 3 miles an hour faster. So quite a difference. And the next set of numbers here are speed runs that I did in my Traxxas Bandit with these batteries. I'll put a link in a video description for the testing I did with these 3 different batteries in the Traxxas Bandit. It was all done on the same day. Now the folks that watch my channel regularly know that I've gotten the Bandit up to 75 miles an hour on 2S, but that's with a different setup, different gearing, and it is worth mentioning, however, this difference would be even greater. If these were 75 miles an hour, the difference for this would be even greater than the 10 to 12 miles an hour we're seeing here, because the voltage sag would be exaggerated that much more for the Ovonic. The Liperior and the Gens Ace batteries are very close when it comes to speed runs. The variation from one run to another is greater than the difference in speed of these two batteries. So I estimated that the Gens Ace would have reached 65 miles an hour. The last column here is the price. I did not update this completely, but the Ovonic and the Liperior would be the cheapest. This Liperior battery is not available right now, however. This Gens Ace isn't cheap, but it seems to be a very good quality battery and it had great capacity. So it's on sale right now for $60 up at Amy. And the Turnigy battery is $40 plus shipping. So you have to get that through Hobby King, and I think the shipping is at least $10, but it's an excellent battery. Now I made a few notes in the final column here. And the Anwanfi battery, it puffed up after about 15 charges and the performance just went down the tubes. It never did perform well, but I eventually just discharged it and I'm gonna dispose of it one of these days. The Ovonic battery, poor performance, but it is reliable performance. All the Ovonic batteries I have exceeded their manufacturer's claimed capacity rating, except this one, but I think it could have if I had discharged it a little bit more before doing the testing. And the voltage spread between cells has been good. And in general, they're, in my experience, reliable batteries. They're just not strong performers. Now the Turnigy, outstanding LiPo. It's definitely stood the test of time, and I would definitely purchase this LiPo again if I purchased LiPos. I don't. People send them to me for testing, but I used to purchase them, and I would recommend this Turnigy Nanotech. Now this Liperior, it punched way above its weight class. It's performed exceptionally strong, especially for the price, and it's not marketed as one of their high performance LiPos. So great battery, just doesn't fit well in a lot of my cars. It's long and wide. So keep that in consideration if you're considering this battery. You might not even be able to find it though. So just check out Liperior in general. My experience has been many of their batteries perform well. They have a few that don't perform as well, but keep a close eye on the measurements of their batteries because sometimes they're different than typical sizes. And lastly, the Gens Ace. It's a great hard case battery. It checks all the boxes. The only small issue I had with it was that one cell, the voltage dipped a little more than I would have liked to see, but the battery seems to perform just fine regardless, and the cells bounced right back up after that small issue. And I just noticed I had left this on from a previous test, so I'll go ahead and delete that. That has nothing to do with the 2S testing. All right guys, that's all I have for now. I figured I'd go ahead and do a 2S LiPo test. Maybe I'll add more in the future, but my 3S LiPo test is coming up soon. And that's gonna have about 12 different LiPos I compare, very similar in size, and I think you guys will find that one really interesting. Let me know in the comments section if there's anything you'd like to see me do differently. All right, that's all I have for now. Please give me a like and consider subscribing to the channel, and look for that future LiPo testing coming up in the next few weeks. All right, take care.